Free agent defensive lineman in 2023. The 49ers roster. Who is in danger of leaving the San Francisco 49ers? Who's a priority re-sign for the 49ers? And might there be some names outside the organization that the 49ers could bring in to bolster their defensive line? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, official sports book of the NFL. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. A couple of quick news notes, Crock, before we get into the defensive line. And I want to talk Javon Kinlaw, reports from Matt Barrows that his fifth-year option unlikely to be picked up, which is something that should be no surprise if you listen to this podcast. And we talked about what those fifth-year options were looking like for Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Ayuk. But there's a report that's making its rounds on Twitter and on social media on Wednesday night, and I don't even want to say the name of who's reporting it because it's so erroneous. And but I just want to put it out there because people can be talking about it. It's going to be a hot topic, you know, that the way that topics go in the off season and the way things can spread like wildfire. And I think it's like it's from a radio show in the New England area, close to the New England Patriots. And the report was basically the New England Patriots are sniffing around Deebo Samuel as if there could be a potential trade happening there. And it's just flat out not possible. So just, if you see that report, realize it's not possible. It's not happening. There's like $30 million in dead money for Deebo Samuel starting the new year of a big contract. Anytime someone signs a really big, lucrative contract in the NFL, it's very rare that a team would be able to trade him or cut him anytime soon after signing that deal. And so for Deebo Samuel, even if you traded him, it would be, $29 million in dead money minus what he's going to make for his cap hit would still put you at negative $20 million cap hit for trading him. So it's just not something that the 49ers would entertain anyway for Deebo, even if they could monetarily, I don't think. But especially with the cap side of things and the dead money and the cap hit, it's just not happening. So I want to throw that out there first. So rest easy, Croc. Deebo's going to stick around.
One of my favorite players. No way I thought he was leaving, at least not yet. Now, we did talk about him making a departure, but not until Ayuk is ready to truly re-up.
There's some time still left with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. We've talked about on past episodes. We'll talk about again when we look at the wide receiver position here in our offseason preview, our free agents preview here. One other quick note here, Croc. You see the report about Rex Ryan, your boy? Rex Ryan might be coming back to the NFL, leaving ESPN for defensive coordinator job with the Denver Broncos. Been out of the league entirely coaching since 2016. He hasn't been a defensive coordinator since 2008. And he was your head coach when you were with the Jets there in 2013?
Yeah, 2013. Yeah. So Rex Ryan, man, again, anybody that has ever asked me about him, I'm like, man, how is Rex? I'm like, man, he's the best coach I've ever been around. And I've been around a lot of different coaches, a lot of different styles, but he was very unique, very unique. You typically have kind of like three different traits that coaches have. And they might have one of the three. They might have two out of the three. But very rarely do they have all three. And it sounds like Kyle might. He definitely goes about it a different way. But Rex Ryan was, one, an amazing teacher. The way that he taught you defense, the way that he explained it, the stories that he used to bring it all together. Can't even repeat it live on air. But it was amazing stuff to where I still remember some of those teachings, and it's been 9-10 years. All right. So that just goes to show like just how great of a teacher he was. X's and O's. He's amazing at that. I mean, his dad was the guy that, created some of these defenses, right? But Buddy Ryan or Philip?
Buddy Ryan. Yeah, he was the architect of the Monsters of the Midway, right? That Chicago Bears 85 defense.
Yeah. So, I mean, and even then, he was so open to the players about, hey, man, we can do these things and change. And okay, what do you want to do, Calvin Pace? You want to drop in the coverage? And all right, we could try that. If it doesn't work, we'll never do it again. And then he was the ultimate players coach, ultimate players coach. And you don't see a whole lot of that. Even guys like me, bottom of the roster. Hey, Crock, I heard you got some teeth pulled. Man, that has hurt. And like for most guys, especially when you're at the bottom, you're just a number. Typically it's, hey, 41, stop doing that. Or, hey, 41, come over here. And like called you by your name, right? So like he just had this connection with his players. And then lastly, and I think I said 3 things, but it might as well be 4 things, master motivator. Master motivator, he was a guy who, I think a lot of people hear the things that he said on TV and think that he's just talking, but he really feels like that. And he says those things because he instills that type of confidence in his players. So the team that I was on, 2013, excuse me, they had no business winning 8 games. And somehow they squeaked out 8 games, having to play even sometimes they had to play Geno Smith. And then guys like Matt Sims, not even Chris Sims, right? Matt Sims, his little brother. So
I didn't even know there was another Sims. How did I miss Matt?
Yeah, there's Matt Sims. All right, so I picked him off in the green and white scrimmage. But you don't come across a lot of coaches that were like him. And, it just, he couldn't get that quarterback situation right. And the offense just wasn't quite good enough. But the defenses, for the most part, man, they always showed up. So shout out to Rex Ryan. I know this is about 49ers, but he's definitely my favorite coach I've ever been around.
I think I got the call from that interception in the green and white scrimmage.
Eric Crocker, always around the football at that time, made a great catch.
Fantastic stuff. I love the insight there. And when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers and their defensive line, I want to start with Javon Kinlaw because even though he's not a free agent, there's a lot of possibilities with his career and where it's going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. Javon Kinlaw, reported by Matt Barrows recently, and it's something we've talked about. I think there's 0 chance he gets his 5th-year option picked up for not next year, but the year after. He's going into year 4, the last true year of his rookie contract. And then for those first rounders from the 2020 draft, teams have to decide this spring, and I can't remember what exactly the date is, sometime near the draft. They have to decide on the 5th-year options for those players for what would be the 2024 season of their contracts. And Brandon Ayuk, I think his number is $14.1 million. That's a bargain for, starting caliber wide receivers. Could be a true number 1 on some teams. He plays second, third fiddle to some guys on the 49ers roster in the passing game. But it's a no-brainer you're picking up Brandon Ayuk's 5th-year option. But Javon Kinlaw has only played 13 of 13 games over the last 2 years, including the playoffs. And the Niners have played 3 games in the playoffs both seasons. So that's 20 games each season. We're talking 40 games. The Niners played 40 games in the last 2 years. It's kind of crazy. And Javon Kinlaw has only played 13 of those. And his play when he is playing in those games has been hit or miss. He'll flash some really great plays and then he'll have some plays where he just gets too high if he doesn't dominate the guy in front of him and gets turned and opens the gate in the running game. And it just happens a little bit too often. He got thrown out of the club in his last game, the NFC Championship game. It's something you just can't see for a guy that's that big. And so Matt Barrows said, it's unlikely the 49ers are going to pick up his 5th-year option. I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody right now, but that means he's still back for another year, potentially. That would give him an opportunity to earn his next contract, even if it's not with the San Francisco 49ers. So he'll be going into the last year of his rookie contract next year if they don't pick up that 5th-year option. And when it comes to Javon Kinlaw, you're not going to cut him or anything like that because I think his salary is in the $5-6 million neighborhood this year. But if you cut him, it's all guaranteed and you wouldn't get any cap savings. So you'd save literally $0 if you cut Javon Kinlaw. But I wonder if the 49ers would entertain a trade for Javon Kinlaw. Would DeMeco Ryans be interested in bringing in someone like Javon Kinlaw to try to get a little bit more out of him next year for something? And it wouldn't be a lot that the 49ers would get, but then the 49ers would get about half of that. So they would get about a little over $2.5 million in cap savings from trading Javon Kinlaw, even if it was for, nothing practically. And then his new team would only be picking up, I think, $2.7 million or whatever it is. So it might not be that bad of a deal for another team just to see what they have in a physically talented dude. Because the bummer of Javon Kinlaw, Crock, because we were there in training camp, how good he looked. He worked hard, right? He worked hard to have.
You're saying when you say how good he looks, we're talking about his body.
Right. Yeah. He came in and it was like, wow, Javon Kinlaw, because he came out as like 330 pounds or something like that. And, and he's a huge guy. He's the biggest guy on the team. And I saw him this summer is like he's slimmed down a lot. Like you could tell he put in work. He was ripped and he was looking like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to kill people this year. And you really thought this would be his breakout year. And unfortunately, you know, with the chronic injuries he has, and you know, kept having the inconsistent play, unfortunately. So that's a bummer. And it's looking like he's not going to be a long-term piece for the 49ers.
It is tough. And I think, you know, you talked about him getting kicked out the club. And, you know, with defensive line, especially defensive tackle specifically, there are times where you can kind of go unnoticed. But a lot of times you just want to see, like, can we see a few flash plays or a few impact plays? Or, man, is he blowing things up or stuff in the run? And I guess he contributed to that in the last game. If you look at the stat sheet, they didn't average a whole lot of yards per carry. And maybe it helped. But more times than not, when you notice Kinlaw, he was getting kicked out the club. And for a guy who hasn't been a great pass rusher in his career, and that was one thing where it's like, you know, he might have to work on that. Cool. But at least be good at one thing, right? Be good at really stopping the run. And I think early on we saw some flashes, but it's kind of dwindled down a little bit. And the knee probably has something to do with that. He's dealing with some chronic injuries there. And it overall has impacted his play. And I think it's less than ideal, especially with how you got him. Right? I mean, we're talking about a guy who it looked great on paper. Well, for most people, I didn't care for the pick. I didn't like the thought of replacing DeForest Buckner with a rookie. And now I get the whole resetting the contract thing, but it was just, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just put Eric Armstead at 3 tech. And they just wanted to go in a different direction. But
I thought when they chose Armstead, it was they had it built in because Armstead was going to be the guy to fill his spot, but they still wanted Armstead to play the big end, so they wanted to go big on the defensive line and ended up with Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I understand that the logic behind it, and that's one thing I try to do. I think a lot of people, they want the right thing, or, oh man, I wish the 49ers would have done this. I just try to understand, what are they trying to do? So from that standpoint, what they're trying to do, I get it. And it did look good on paper. But it just, so far, has not worked out. Now, there's still time. But I think the thing that worries me with him, because, you know, I'll give guys the benefit of doubt that they can develop until they're just no longer with the 49ers. But the one thing that just kind of gives me a little pause is if it is indeed chronic knee injuries. And if that's the case, and that's what's having him play the way he has, then that just might be who he is. And that's tough because I don't know how you improve on that.
So the guy that the 49ers chose to keep that offseason when they traded away DeForest Buckner and drafted Javon Kinlaw was Eric Armstead. And his cap number is getting pretty large for the 49ers. I want to talk a little bit about Armstead and talk about the free agents the 49ers have. Maybe look at the free agent market, see if there's any fits or what the 49ers might be shopping for in free agency come March 15th when free agency officially opens. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, you don't want all the fat and calories, right? So you got to try Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's all right. Real chocolate, not a fake brown chocolatey flavored substance. Real chocolate, and it really sets off Built Bars. Really makes you feel like you're getting a treat. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. It's so delicious, you won't know they're good for you. They're perfect for anybody that's trying to stay fit, get rid of all those terrible for you snacks and replace them with Built Bars. And I don't know how they do it, Crock. We've talked about this before, but they do it. These bars taste like candy bars, but they're protein bars that have most Built Bars have only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can get all the flavors of Built Bars at Built.com, but you can find them on store shelves now as well, including your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Go to your nearest Walmart today. Go to the pharmacy section. You can find 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate, and coconut puff flavors. Or you can go to Sam's Club and get a 13-bar box of hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. Tons of flavors. I like the peanut butter. You can thank me later. And you can also go to Built.com and find all the flavors of Built Bars. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen today and every day. Make sure you're checking out everything else on the network, like the Peacock and Williamson NFL show daily. Got the latest mock draft up there right now on Peacock and Williamson. And the brand new Locked On NFL draft as well. Tons covered. And don't forget, your team's covered not only in the NFL, but Major League Baseball, college, NBA as well, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Crock. Eric Armstead's not going anywhere, but his cap number is rising quite a bit because not only did it's funny because his cap number is a lot bigger than DeForest Buckner's now, and it was part of the equation was a cost saving move plus the draft pick you were going to get from the Colts when they chose Eric Armstead and decided to re-up him and let let DeForest Buckner go. And Eric Armstead's been really good. He's the second best defensive lineman on the team after Nick Bosa. But with Armstead, his contract was backloaded a little bit, and then also he's restructured his deal already. So he's in the over $20 million cap hit neighborhood right now. I think it's more like $25 million. Second to only Trent Williams, who's also had his contract restructured, and he's in the $27 million neighborhood. So the top 5 contracts on the 49ers are eating up about a quarter of their salary cap going into the year. But it just, looking at how the team's built, really interesting choice and how it's come together. And the 49ers were also able to add other players to the roster then that they wouldn't have if they kept DeForest Buckner. At least that's what, that's what the story was coming out of Santa Clara. But just looking back real quick, how do you feel about the whole 2020 and now beyond that went down with Buckner, Kinlaw, Armstead? And do you think they made the right move?
I did not like it then. So I definitely don't like it now. Now, I do like Armstead, and I think Armstead is good. I talked about wanting to see, can you give me some flash plays, Kinlaw? And he, kind of haven't seen that, but you definitely saw with Armstead. It's not a guy who's going to pop off the screen all the time, but you just look and see him doing a lot of the dirty work. And then every now and then he'll buzz back there and end up getting a sack or, a tackle for loss. And he just kind of makes his presence felt. Well, didn't get that from Kinlaw. And again, I just didn't like the thought process behind that. I understood it, but I would have definitely went in a different direction. And by different direction, it would have been Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb was actually my wide receiver 1, and you had an opportunity to get him. Now, love Ayuk. So that's kind of whatever. But just in the sense of how they did it, I didn't care for that. What do you think, though, from a financial standpoint, the fact that you traded away Buckner and it freed up money so you could keep, an Eric Armstead and Jimmy Ward. But do you think there's any way they would have been able to keep Buckner and Ward, but not Armstead? And I know the issue with that is you would not have got that first round pick. But would you say, you know what, forget the first round pick, lose Armstead, keep Jimmy Ward, keep Buckner?
I think it was the execution of the draft pick that I didn't like and the replacement of Buckner with Kinlaw. And I said at the time, this isn't revisionist history or hindsight stuff. And I've got the receipts for it. And I was like, okay, well, look, you're going to get a first round pick and you can have all these other players and then draft another player and build your roster. I understood that idea as hard as it was to get rid of Buckner. And the Colts called the 49ers bluff and gave up a first round pick and signed him. And that was a lot. That was a lot at the time,
But Peacock, real quick.
Yeah.
He was your everything. Everything that I was talking to one of my buddies on the phone today, and we were talking about the number 1 overall pick with the Chicago Bears and what to do. And he's like, you would trade Justin Fields? And I'm like, yeah. You get to reset the rookie contract at the quarterback position. You don't know. He's showed, the flashes of talent, but lost a lot of games. You could talk about the talent around it, whatever the case is, but you just don't know, right? There's as many questions about it will Justin Fields be a great quarterback as there would be with Bryce Young. So go ahead, get some assets, reset your quarterback position as far as the contract. With DeForest Buckner, there were no questions about who he was. He was an amazing interior player. He was an all-pro guy, Pro Bowl guy. He was the leader of your team. He was the vocal leader. He was everything that you wanted a guy to be on and off the field. He contributed greatly to the success of your defense, right? So that wasn't, it was even with the execution of it, and again, I try to understand it. I get it. You want to keep a couple other guys. But it was this, you didn't have no questions about this guy and who he was and what his impact was to the team. That's the hard part with it.
No, it's hard
from a financial standpoint, but man.
He was an Iron Man. How many injury problems the 49ers have had? This dude played every single snap of every game. He played more snaps than any defensive lineman in the league. So, and I loved DeForest Buckner. You don't have to tell me about how important he was to the team. But but the fact that they ponied up the first round pick and all the players they picked, I mean, I didn't really love that deal at the time either, but I understood why the 49ers would do it. They just didn't execute it well, and not hitting on a player with that pick kills the whole value of the entire deal, basically. So clearly that wasn't a deal that turned out great for the 49ers. And to be honest, like, would you, and especially looking back at how much success the 49ers have had at safety, would it have been that big of a deal? Would it have been problematic for the 49ers to not have Armstead and not have Ward and not have who's the other player that they talked about? Maybe Juszczyk was one of them that they talked about they wouldn't have been able to have, or something like that. And look, we know what the salary cap is, and we know how you can circumvent it, and it's not quite all the way fake, but it's a little bit fake at times. I think the 49ers could have done what they needed to do and bring back most of the players they wanted to, if they wanted to keep Buckner, if they were motivated to do it. But unfortunately, they weren't.
You lose depth at certain spots, but I mean, we've seen teams kick the can down the road. I mean, all right, you could talk about whatever with the DeForest Buckner. And listen, guys, everybody listening right now, I am not a capologist, all right? But somehow you kept a terrific team on the field while paying D Ford $20 million a year somehow, and he ain't even on the field playing.
And on one hand, you save salary cap space in 2020. But guess what? The deal that Buckner signed, the deal that Armstead signed, Buckner's cheaper right now. So you'd be saving money right now for some of these free agents that we're going to talk about here on the interior of the 49ers defensive line. So that's part of the equation as well, too. What are those defensive free agents right now for the 49ers is, I'll go through the interior. We'll talk about defensive tackles. We'll get into the edge another time when we have more time to dive into those position groups. But 49ers free agent defensive tackles, there is 4 unrestricted defensive tackles on the 49ers roster currently. And actually, take that back. Kevin Givens is still a restricted free agent, so he'll be back. They'll tender him, and I don't worry of losing Givens, and he might have an even bigger role next year. But Hassan Ridgeway, who they signed last offseason, is an unrestricted free agent for the 49ers. He played 26.5% of the snaps for the team. T.Y. McGill, who's a late addition to the 49ers roster off of the practice squad from the Minnesota Vikings, and he was awesome. He had more he had more impact in fewer snaps than Javon Kinlaw did as far as pressures and that type of thing goes statistically. And you could just see in the eyeball test that T.Y. McGill, who's been a journeyman in the NFL, was really a nice little player for the 49ers, and they need that style of player on their defensive line. And he is a free agent, and he shouldn't cost a lot. So to me, he's a no-brainer. And then Maurice Hurst, who's just had injury problems and didn't play any snaps for the 49ers last year, and I'm afraid his career is going to be over. So if those guys, clearly to me, T.Y. McGill should be the number one priority. And depending on what Hassan Ridgeway, who I believe is a local young man anyway, and might want to come back at a pretty decent number, that would probably be the way to go. Is there anybody on that list that you think has to stay for the 49ers?
I feel like a lot of them, I mean, aside from Givens, who you said, I mean, he's coming back because he's a restricted free agent. There's not a whole lot there where I feel like these guys hit the market and have just this robust, market of teams that are like, oh man, we got to have this guy, So who is it? Who out of those guys you say, man, you got to sign them now before they hit the market because everybody's going to want them. Like, I don't think they are that guy.
Will say really quick with Givens is he's a restricted free agent, so it's not guaranteed, and it depends what level of contract they give him. Like last year, it was Azeez Al-Shaair, restricted free agent. They tendered him at the second round level. So if a team signed him, they'd have to give the 49ers a second round pick, but they just wanted to make sure that they didn't lose him, but they had to pay him a little more. I wonder if Givens might get the same treatment this year, because if you get tendered at a certain level, a team could still sign you away. And, a team like the Houston Texans, let's say, might want to, snag you. So you might have to make that number a little bit more just to make sure a team would have to give up a draft pick if they were to sign him off your roster.
Sometimes you don't know if a guy is more beneficial on your team, but I feel like Givens might be that guy where, he can hit the free agent market and maybe he doesn't have a bunch of teams after him. But I feel like what he's done for the 49ers is kind of just be this consistent, just role player who can come in a pinch and every once in a while make a flash play. I've really liked what he's done. Again, not this amazing sack guy, but just every once in a while you see this kind of short, stubby guy bust through the line of scrimmage. You're like, man, who was that? Oh, it's Givens, of course.
Next, let's look at the free agent market and maybe some names on the outside that the 49ers could bring in to bolster their defensive line next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. It's midway point of the NBA season. The NFL season's over, but NBA is coming every single night. The season really starts getting going here after the trade deadline and the All-Star break, and then it really gets down to the nitty-gritty in the NBA, and you can have fun all spring long betting on the NBA, college hoops, at America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. And new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sports app. It's safe, secure. App is super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line, point scores, threes drained. There's NFL draft props. There's futures bets on the Super Bowl champion next year, too, if you still want to bet on the NFL. Plus, FanDuel has bigger payouts with the same game parlays, which are super easy to build as well. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, Crock. Is there a type of player you're looking for the 49ers?
I think they definitely need a big body interior guy. I thought Kinlaw could maybe be that. Even just, hey, man, don't be a great pass rusher, but can you be just this guy that just plugs up multiple gaps? Maybe he lost too much weight. Maybe that's what it is, right? I mean, you lose like 30 pounds or whatever it was, that could change some of your strength.
And he's such a tall guy, and he has a problem sometimes with leverage anyway. I think Kinlaw would be an awesome 5 technique in a 3-4 defensive end. I think that's the position you should probably play.
3-4 at 290, definitely.
And actually, dude, how about in Rex Ryan's defense? Like that's right, yeah. Defensive end in Rex Ryan's defense. Remember, was it Quentin Coples?
He was my locker mate.
Like all those dudes, right? The big, long, oversized ends, but aren't like short, stout nose tackle types.
So we had, but they did have that short guy. All right, or
in the nose, but not on the.
But they had Muhammad Wilkerson and Quentin Coples were kind of these.
There you go, Muhammad Wilkerson.
Yeah, outside guys, right? Big Mo, and then there was Sheldon Richardson, who ended up winning Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, Sheldon Richardson. They had those are all first round dudes, weren't they?
They were all first round. Yeah, they were kind of loading up.
But yeah,
but Sheldon wasn't the big guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was maybe 6'2", maybe a shade taller than me, and he was probably close to 300. He didn't look like it though. I thought he wore his weight extremely well. But he would do things where I just like, that wasn't normal, right? Like just the way he was able to do certain things. Coples flashed it too, but he was just kind of lazy. But like Richardson, you just see him do certain things, and it's like, do the 49ers have like that type of guy, or can they get it? Is Sheldon Richardson available? Because he's still playing ball. Like he still can play.
No, he's not still. Is he still in the league?
Oh yeah, let's see where he's at.
No way, Sheldon Richardson. Wow.
Yeah,
but no, you're right. You're right about what you look up where Sheldon Richardson is, but you're right. That's what the 49ers need. They need that defensive tackle, the nose tackle. But
they need the big guy. He's not the big plugger that I would like. I would like to see them. So he was 6'2.5", 294.
Okay, so more of like a 3 tackle type.
He might not be in the league. 2021, he played for the Minnesota Vikings. Doesn't have a team for 2022. So
good career.
Yeah, good career.
But the Niners miss DJ Jones. That's exactly what they need. They need DJ Jones back. Is exactly the player they need on the inside next to.
Go bigger. Go get just the guy that can't play 5 plays in a row.
You trot on the field on first down. You take up 2 blocks and then you leave the field again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go get that guy.
Pounds.
When's the last time the 49ers just have had that big guy? Because even Buckner, right? We talk a lot, glowing remarks about Butler, but sometimes he get pushed out of there too, right? I mean, just so tall.
He's that same build, just like Armstead, like kind of too tall to really anchor down on the inside sometimes. He's so big and so strong and so thick in the ankles all the way through his wrists. But still, sometimes with the tall guys, you're 6'6", hard to have that leverage. I think that was one of the problems that Kinlaw ran into sometimes, which is why I like him as more of a 5 tech, a big defensive end. And, that's what Armstead was too, coming out of college. And he's been really good in that role as well. And that's kind of what the 49ers have. The 49ers don't like the really little speed edge rushers, and they don't like the big, fat defensive nose tackles, right?
Yeah,
they like kind of everybody to
be
be kind of big and just go forward, bigger ends and more long, big, but not oversized defensive tackles. That's kind of what they've put together on that defensive line. And it's worked. You can't really argue with it, but I would like some variance, and I wouldn't mind someone with some real speed coming off the edge. When you see someone like Hassan Riddick, the way he flies around the corner and can close on really athletic quarterbacks, that's important. And having that big plugger defensive tackle in the middle that can take on multiple blocks, I think that would help out a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, you asked me what should they be looking for? That just give me that 6'4", 240 pound, or excuse me, 340 pound, just guy that's just gonna plug some stuff up. And it's like, hey, you can't move him. And I remember the Giants drafted the tackle out of Clemson. I think it was with the Odell Beckham pick. When they traded Odell, they drafted a nose tackle. I didn't think he would go that high.
Dalvin Tomlinson.
No, not Tomlinson.
Because he's a free agent, Dalvin Tomlinson.
Oh, but he'd be maybe somebody.
Yeah. And I'm looking at ESPN's list and they have free agents ranked. Dalvin Tomlinson, he ended up in Minnesota, is their top interior defensive lineman ranked here. The number 2 name on this list, really interesting, the 49ers just saw him, is Javon Hargrave from Philadelphia. I loved him coming out of the draft. He was a small school guy. He's built like a nose, really thick butt, legs, he's well over 300 pounds, but he can give you a pass rush and penetrate as well. And that's ideally, because that's kind of what they had in DJ Jones. It's like a poor man's version of Javon Hargrave. And man, DJ Jones got so much money. I don't know how much someone like Javon Hargrave is going to get. He already got a lot of money just a couple of years ago when he left Pittsburgh and ended up in Philadelphia. So I think these guys are probably out of the 49ers price range. Jerome Payne's a big, strong defensive tackle too. Those are the top 3 D tackles in the market. I just don't think the 49ers can spend like that. So I think they have to go down the list a little bit. And the thing with nose tackles in the draft too is you can find them on day 3 because they're not 3-down players, and you can find those big body guys that aren't great pass rushers. So the 49ers should be able to accomplish that if they just want a guy who can take on blocks.
The defensive tackle I was talking about was Dexter Lawrence out of Clemson.
Oh, right. Dexter Lawrence. Yeah. He's the goofy one, right? He talks some kind of weird stuff.
No, I think the goofy one is
that's Wilkins.
Wilkins that went to the Dolphins.
They were teammates, right?
Yeah, but Dexter Lawrence, man, I mean, he was just a guy. I didn't think he'd go first round just because I thought like teams aren't looking for that type of guy in the first round. But he went first round, and I didn't know this, but 2022, second team All-Pro.
Second team All-Pro. Good job. Dexter Lawrence. Here's a name for you. Go down the list a little bit. Fletcher Cox, kind of washed, more of a 3 technique type of guy anyway. How about Matt Ioannidis? He's not really a nose tackle, I don't think. I'm going to look up what his numbers are. But Matt Ioannidis coming from Wilkes defense over there in Carolina. I wonder if he would be an option.
Oh, yeah. I think you see that. We talked a little bit about Rex Ryan earlier, and I remember having Landry in the secondary when I was there with the Jets. And, you go and get a guy that played for you. And not – so remember, there were brothers. There was like LaRon Landry and Deron Landry, I think.
LaRon and Deron, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I played with not LaRon, so I played with the other one. But, hey, this is a guy who played with him in Baltimore. And it's like, yeah, come on, man. You know this defense. Let's plug you in. And, I could see Wilkes maybe doing something like that where it's like, hey, we got this guy. He's going to know some of the things I want. Think he can help our defensive line, give us some depth. Maybe have to start, depending on the health of Kinlaw. And let's go. Now, okay, here's a question. And I think because the 49ers typically draft defensive linemen really high, first round, we've seen a bunch of that. Do you prioritize defensive tackle because you maybe can't trust the health of Kinlaw?
Say that again?
Do you prioritize defensive tackle because you maybe can't trust the health of Kinlaw? Like, do you say, you know what? Like, okay, we got Armstead. Okay, we got Bosa. But, man, we don't have any high picks. But with our first pick that we get, that's probably a comp pick in the 3rd round, we are taking a tackle. Now, I know you could do best player available and all that. But, like, at the top of your list is like, hey, we hope to be able to get this defensive tackle in this range.
I would say yes, absolutely. It's a possibility. I would put defensive tackle on the list of positions where best player from this small position group: offensive tackle, defensive tackle, center. I think that's the group I would say is the biggest needs for the 49ers. I might be missing one, but anybody out of those, maybe even a corner. The Niners could go a lot of different ways with those picks because they're not super early. But defensive tackle is one of the top needs on the 49ers. I absolutely think so, because even if, Kinlaw's going in the last year of his contract, so if he balls out and has a crazy year, the Niners aren't going to sign him to a big contract after the year anyway. So they need depth there, and they need that nose tackle type of player, because I don't think Javon Kinlaw's that. I think Kinlaw's probably going to slip into being basically Eric Armstead's backup this year.
Right. Maybe Kalia Davis, and this is a guy who pretty much redshirted for the 49ers this year, coming off of an injury, but they did draft him in the 6th round out of UCF. Maybe that's a guy who they're like, we'll see, because if we know one thing about the 49ers, they've done a really good job of getting protection out of the guys who are late round picks. Maybe Kalia Davis is a guy who they're like, hey, man, we knew this guy was talented. He slipped because of an injury, but we were able to get him, and we know exactly how to utilize him and plug him into our defense, and we're going to get the most out of him, and he's going to play well for us, and you'll forget all about the guy Kinlaw. We're talking really bad about Kinlaw, so if he's listening, I apologize.
We're being honest about the assessment, and I think Javon Kinlaw, if he was being real with himself, would say that nothing we've said has been inaccurate on this episode. Matt Ioannidis, by the way, bigger than I thought, 6'3", 310 pounds. So there you go, and has played nose tackle. So maybe there's your guy. Reunite him with Wilkes. He's been playing next to Derek Brown, who's a real big one over there. So yeah, he's big. From what I remember about Ioannidis, he's not a nose, but with his size could probably play some of that. But I always thought he's more of a penetrating sort of a non-nose tackle, defensive tackle. 310 pounds is bigger than I thought he was. Interesting play there. Let's see if there's any more names here on the interior defensive line list as we go down. Jaron Reed could be one. Andrew Billings was a guy I liked coming out of Baylor. Big-bodied, well over 300 pounds, nose tackle guy. And once you get this far down the list, I don't think a lot of these players are gonna cost much for the 49ers. But here's the thing: is it gets thin real quick on the defensive line, because these guys get paid a lot and really good ones get snatched up. So there's not actually a lot of names on the list that I'm super excited about. Unfortunately, the top names, guys like Hargrave, I just don't think are going to be in the cards. The 49ers aren't going to be able to afford the guys at the top of the list. So as the names I saw right there, you think about the Wilkes connection from Carolina, Matt Ioannidis, name to watch in free agency at defensive tackle for the 49ers, especially since they don't really want to. It seems like they don't want a pure nose tackle anymore.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Locked on 49ers, Brian Peacock. He's telling you who's going to be on the 49ers.
We'll see. I'm rarely right. It's hard to get in the head of Kyle Shanahan sometimes. You think something makes a lot of sense to you, and then they go the complete opposite direction. But we'll find out. We'll talk more about all the other position groups as well in the 49ers. Look into the free agents that are on the roster, guys that the 49ers could bring off of the roster. If there's some names you like that we did not mention, let us know. At BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker in the YouTube comments. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Crock and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.